Cool. So Jessica Clark's asking if we can record this round. Apparently we're expecting it to be a particularly excellent round, which would be fabulous. Is that okay with the two of you?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Aiden, that true for you too? We just need all four of you to say yes. All right, cool. Thanks. I'll put it in chat that all four have agreed. Okay, so then she's asking if everyone can leave their cameras on for the whole time rather than turning it off. Just for the sake of video, if that's okay. All right. I guess I'm ready to go. Is Negative, you ready to go?
One sec, can I make a copy of this document? Sorry about the hold up.
Okay.
I have a really quick question.
Sure.
Is it okay if we turn our cameras off during prep?
Jess, are you okay with that? Nope, she may have already left. I mean, to the extent it's your debate, so do what you need to. But Jessica's asking if you could keep them on as much as you can anyway.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, we're not here to throw you off your game. Jessica's Angel was asking if it was okay if they turned it off during prep. I said, if they need to be comfortable, that's fine. We don't want to throw them off their game. So, but keep it on as much as you can.
Okay. Judge, will you allow for
Sorry, the internet's being really slow. I'm just sharing it with him.
Oh. Judge, do you allow for OpenCX?
It's up to you all. What would you prefer?
Opponents, are you okay with OpenCX? Okay, perfect. And then can we have your paradigm, please?
Yeah, so just make sure the primary person is still the primary person as far as OpenCX, but if your partner needs to try and chime in, that's great. Paradigm-wise, I'm pretty much tabula rasa as long as everyone's having fun, so I'll vote for pretty much anything you would like me to. Just impact it. Give me some clash, please, and let's have fun.
Okay, so for introductions, I'm Italia. On DMLK side, I'll be your 1A.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Angel. I'm also a DMLK debater, and I will be the 2A.
Hello, I'm Krish Vipani. I am a Northfield debater, and I'll be the 1NC.
I'm Aiden, and Northfield debater, and I'll be 2NC.
Good. All right, so if everyone's ready, let me just get into this here and we can get started.
Okay.
Okay, ready to go.
Okay. So for a quick roadmap, we're going to be going over inherency, then common, and then plan, and then sovereignty, and then a framework. So time can start now. Contention 1 inherency subpoint A. The thousands of new dams to come disrupts the carbon cycle, destroys ecosystems, and emits significant methane, not accounting for the current greenhouse gas emissions. Benson 21. As ongoing global reliance on fossil fuels continues to accelerate climate change, urgency and interest in transitioning to renewable energy sources is increasing. Hydropower is often framed as a source of naturally replenishing clean energy, less harmful to humans and ecosystems than fossil fuels. Hydropower dams drastically alter river and reduce ecosystem services. As humans continue to turn to hydroelectric power as an alternative energy source, 3,700 new hydropower dams are either planned or under construction, adding to the estimated 60,000 large dams currently in existence across the globe. Hydropower has been found to cause significant disruptions to the natural carbon cycle. The reservoirs created by dams emit methane. Inherency subpoint B, the hydroelectric industry resists FERC's authority to decommission dams, and this is why the ASK plan is necessary. Bryant 2019, the hydroelectric industry claims that FERC lacks the authority to deny a new license for hydroelectric dams, impose environmental conditions, or impose decommissioning costs on the dam owner, and that if maintaining a dam is no longer in the public interest, either the federal level or another party must pay the current owner to overtake the project. Contention 2 harm, subpoint A. Dams kill fish globally, sparks food insecurity and alternative sales. Alterman 20. A report issued last week revealed that migratory freshwater fish have declined by 76% since 1970. This highlights a continuing threat to food security. Quite a lot, actually. Hydropower dams, one of the primary reasons for decline in migratory fish and expansion of hydropower, is a key threat to some of the largest runs of migratory fish that remain. Thus, hydropower development triggers a set of difficult trade-offs between energy and food security. Further exacerbating the challenge, the primary technology in managing those trade-offs. Fish passage structures have a relatively poor track record. Harm subpoint B, believe it or not, dams pollute. Workman 7. Dams pollute the air. The public may commonly see dams as producers of clean energy, yet fewer than 2% of United States dams generate any power whatsoever. Some could be retrofitted. But peer-reviewed scientific research has demonstrated that dams, in fact, may worsen climate change because the reservoir and gate releases of methane. That the world's 52,000 large dams contribute more than 4% of the total warming impact of human activities. The dam reservoirs contribute 25% of human-caused methane emissions, the world's largest single source. Earth's millions of smaller dams compound that effect. Harm subpoint C, dams prevent food sovereignty for Native Americans. The Guardian 2021. Food sovereignty, the right to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods, is linked to the Yurok tribe members' rights and cultural identity, as well as their nutrition and health. You can't exercise a right to eat your traditional foods if there are no traditional foods. So the fight for a clean, healthy river is inextricably tied to the ability to exercise food sovereignty. And I'll cut the card there. Therefore, we offer the following plan. The United States federal government will substantially increase its protection of water resources by decommissioning and removing future plans for all dams that pollute water resources in the United States. Contention 3, solvency. Subpoint A, removing hydroelectric dams will cut emissions and protect river ecosystems. Wernick 14. Dams and reservoirs account for 4% of man-made carbon emissions globally, equivalent to all the world's airline traffic combined. There are examples of reservoirs that have 7 times more climate impact than a coal power plant. Removing or stopping large hydroelectric dam projects and restoring rivers to their natural state will cut pollution and restore health to ecosystems. There's not enough attention being paid to river health. The rate of species extinction is greatest in aquatic freshwater ecosystems, but we're really dealing with planetary cycles here. Rivers connect us to deltas, and the coastal marine systems, they carve their way through the land and are the ribbon of life in dry and wet communities. We are clogging the arteries of our planet because of the illusion that the alternative to energy pollution is to just dam our way to some sustainable future. It's a dangerous course for the planet. Solvency subpoint B. Removing high-risk dams restores fish and resurrects ecosystems. Chenard 14. We've glorified dams for decades, but our pride in building these engineering marvels have often blinded us to the environmental damage that they cause. Interventions like fish elevators and trap and haul programs that trap fish around impoundments don't lead to true recovery for wild fish populations or reverse the other environmental problems caused by blocking a river's flow. But we do know that removing dams brings streams and rivers back to life and replenishes our degraded aquifers. A case in point is the Elbow River in Washington, where 2 hydroelectric dams built early in the last century exacted huge environmental costs, but were no longer important as power generators. Salmon runs that once reached about 400,000 fish a year dropped to fewer than 3,000 a year at the Elbow Dam. A year after the Elbow Dam was removed, Chinook salmon returned to the river in numbers not seen in decades, with 3/4 of them observed spawning upstream of the former dam site. Today, the river runs free from its headquarters in Olympic National Park. Solvency subpoint C. Dam removal is proven to improve water resources. American Rivers 2022. The scientific community has advanced our understanding of rivers and helped us to realize the significant negative impacts that dams have on river systems. Dams disrupt a river's natural course and flow, alter water temperature in the stream, redirect river channels, transform floodplains, and disrupt river continuity. Studies indicate that dam removal and decommission can be highly effective river tool to reverse these impacts. The long-term ecological benefits of dam removal, as measured in improved water quality, sediment transport, and native resident and migratory species recovery, demonstrates conclusively that dam removal can be an effective long-term river resource improvement. And now on to our framework. Contention for a framework. Prioritize a policy that best maintains the planet's ecosystems. Commodores 2021. In the delicately tangled web of an ecosystem, snapping certain anchor lines can bring the whole thing tumbling down. Ecosystem services are the ways in which nature contributes to humanity's well-being, such as fresh water resources, pollination, or plants mitigating soil erosion. These services are interwoven within everything that we do. Many of our activities are severing the threads that support these ecosystem services at random and at an accelerating rate. These connections need to be made more visible in assessments of nature's contributions to humans' well-being in order to fully understand how to manage and protect these benefits of humans. With that, I'm now open for cross-examination.
Okay. My first question is, how much water is polluted by dams in the U.S.?
Okay, so in our subpoint B harms card, it states how scientific research has demonstrated that dams in fact may worsen climate change, and the gate releases, and that the world's 52,000 large dams contribute more than 4% of the total warming impact of human activities.
And they also contribute to 25% of human-caused methane emissions.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
Chris, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. You mentioned they're the cause of 25% of global carbon emissions, right?
Methane.
Would you have methane? Would you have a statistic about how much it contributes to water resources?
What do you mean?
Well, like how, like the impact of dams, like if they contribute to like 25% of methane, like how, I guess, what percent of dams, or what percent of water pollution is from dams?
We don't know that exact amount, but we do know that because there are toxic chemicals that are built up in these dams, they not only pollute the water that these dams are at, but they also furthermore pollute our atmosphere by releasing these greenhouse gases.
Okay. So you don't have a number of how much of this pollution is actually caused by dams?
No, we don't.
Okay. Could you repeat your plan one more time, please?
Yeah, so the plan is the United States federal government should substantially increase the protection of water resources by decommission and removing future plans for all dams that pollute water resources in the United States.
You're muted if you're talking.
All right, sorry. Could you define the FDRC?
So the FERC is basically called the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
That's time. Meg, would you like prep?
I'll
Okay.
take two. Can I take two?
Yeah, I'll let you know.
All right, I'm ready to start.
Okay, that was Amendment 36.
All right, cool. Opponents, you ready? All right. In the speech, I will be presenting a T argument as well as a disadvantage. All right, topicality. Judge, as we are participating in a policy debate, we believe it is important for the affirmative to propose a policy that actually adheres to the resolution. This brings me to topicality. First is interpretation. The 2021-22 resolution is resolved. The United States federal government should substantially increase its protection of water resources in the United States. Next, substantially is defined as to a great or significant extent. Violation. According to the resolution, the affirmative must enact substantial change. This plan does not create any substantial change because as there is not a specific number as to how much water pollution is actually due to the chemical toxins released from dams. It could be a very small number for all we know. Third is standards. In policy debate, the affirmative ground is the resolution and the negative ground is everything else. It is important in policy debate for the affirmative team to propose a policy through which the negative can respond to and provide clash. By not providing a plan that follows the resolution, the affirmative is encroaching on the negative ground and therefore skewing the debate in their favor. Last is voting. Judge, in order to maintain an educational value in debate, both teams need to fulfill their roles. The role of the affirmative is to provide a policy change that follows the resolution and proposes a change in the status quo. By not doing so, they're making it impossible for the negative to prepare and provide clash. Now on to my inflation disadvantage. Contention 1 is uniqueness. Point A. The U.S. economy is recovering from COVID and is projected to grow faster than it has in nearly 40 years. Penny 21. The U.S. economy grew at a solid 6.4% in the first 3 months of the year. Economists expect to see even stronger growth in the current quarter as widespread vaccinations allow businesses will reopen. Boosting recovery is close to $3 trillion. The federal government has approved stimulus measures. The revised data continue to paint a very positive picture of the U.S. economy's recovery. The Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development forecasts that the U.S. GDP would grow 6.9% in 2021, the biggest increase since 1984. Substantial additional fiscal stimulus and a rapid vaccination campaign have given a boost to the economic recovery. Point B. U.S. economic growth is strong now, but inflation risks could derail economic recovery. Begin 2021. The U.S. economy is surging. GDP will grow at an average pace of 7.5% in 2021, unseen since 1951. None of this is to say the U.S. economy doesn't face risks. There are also legitimate concerns of inflation. And so serious overheating would force the Fed to put out fire by raising interest rates so rapidly that the recovery itself would be threatened. Point C. Inflation is still low now, and increases are short-term and manageable, especially given a decade-long of lows. Smart 16. The central bank now sees its favorite inflation measure rising at an annual rate of 3.4% before receding to 2.1%, largely driven by pandemic-related issues. We do expect inflation to move down. The Fed have been engaged in a delicate balancing act, been providing enough support to an economy battered by the coronavirus while inviting overstimulating. A number of what structural factors have conspired in taking down any rise in inflation in this or coming years would come off these already low levels and have to push against these growing trends. Contention 2 is the link. Point A. High threshold for the economic benefits. Water protection policy has a terrible track record of accurate cost-benefit analysis. Kaiser 2019. Existing water quality CBAs are undertaken before the regulation takes effect. This is precisely when we know the least amount of policy. CBAs can be incomplete and fail to account for some benefits or cost. Changes are very difficult to document systematically because the relevant data, when collected at all, are scattered. Range of available data on many aspects of the surface water pollution is still poor. Contention 3 is the internal link. Point A. High government spending leads to inflation. Only way to avoid is through high taxation. Long 21. Higher government spending and higher deficits tend to drive inflation higher. Some economists voiced concern when the Democrats passed President Biden's $1.9 trillion relief package in March, that it would overheat the economy, leading to higher prices. Biden is also proposing to spend $4 trillion on infrastructure, though he would like to offset much of that. It's with spending with tax increases that should mute the inflationary effects. Government spending is a result of the plan that the affirmative has proposed, which does cause inflation, as you'll see in the next card. Destroying dams does cost money, the machines, the workers, etc. Point B, the role of the Fed is to regulate the economy, and a byproduct of this is inflation. The plan would dramatically increase spending and debt, leading to huge inflation. Simpson 14. The Fed affects the economy through so-called monetary policy. It is a euphemism. Monetary policy is a euphemism for inflation. The Fed is an institution that was created in order to inflate the money supply. This has been the history of the Fed. It has been used to finance government spending by creating a market for government debt. Financing government spending has been the purpose behind the creation of central banks in general. As a natural result of this process, the Fed causes inflation. Point C. Large amounts of government spending can cause runaway inflation. Schultz 21. Many in Washington now seem to think that the federal government can spend limitless amount of money without any harmful economic consequences. They are wrong. Excessive federal spending is creating a grave economic and national security risk. But some say there's no need to worry about excessive spending, and there is a whiff of inflation in the air. This thinking is dangerously short-sighted. These fundamental laws of economics have not been replaced. Prolific government spending invariably has damaging consequences. High and rising U.S. national debt will eventually crowd out private investment, thereby slowing economic growth and job creation. The Federal Reserve's continued accommodation of deficit spending will inevitably lead to rising inflation. Financial markets will become more prone to turmoil, increasing the chance of another big economic downturn. Point D. Inflation is the biggest risk to the economy, guarantees recession, and then responsible governmental policy now is key. Long 2021. Inflation is the biggest risk that could sink the recovery process. There will be political pressure to tame any inflation. Economists believe the Fed's prediction that the inflation will subside later this year. If a lot of people start believing inflation is here to stay, the Fed would have to respond by hiking interest rates quickly, a tactic that typically causes recessions. Point E. Post-pandemic recovery is fragile and risks spilling over internationally. New economic crises risk us plunging over the edge. Responses to the pandemic have caused new tensions that threaten stability, exacerbating global economic fragility. Existing trends have been given fresh momentum by the crisis. Business risks emanating from these trends have been amplified by the crisis, including stagnation, the collapse of small businesses, the exacerbation of inequality, making it harder to achieve long-term sustainable development. Point F. U.S. economic overheating ripples out into the rest of the world, creating the worst economic crisis in a generation. Now it is key to stave off collapse. Lackman 21. The specter of U.S. economic overheating will raise interest rates and provoke a major reversal of capital flows. Could have a serious untoward consequences for both the U.S. government and global economies.
I'll give you a little time. Don't worry. All right, go ahead. You got 10 more seconds. Well, I added 10 seconds, so you have 1 minute left.
All right, could have a serious untoward consequences for both the U.S. and global economies. Considerable damage will be done to these economies. If now we were to have an emerging market debt crisis, it would be very much more serious and more pervasive than earlier crises. Contention for its impact. U.S. economic decline has caused detrimental damage to the U.S. less than 15 years ago. Chen, Markarak, Nabar, 18. A study looked at a sample of 180 countries to measure the decline in economic activity in the decade after Lehman Brothers collapsed. While many economies saw output losses more relatively pre-crisis trends, some suffered severe banking crisis that's part of the global financial panic, while others saw weaker activity in advanced economies reverberated globally through trade and financial channels. The widespread pattern of spending advanced emerging market and low-income developing crises suggest losses go beyond such corrections. Analysis shows that the crisis may have lasting scars beyond those well-documented effects on growth trends. For example, fertility rates have been on this slight period of decline in economies' development, and that will drag on the size of the labor force in the future of those countries.
That's time.
All right, my partner will finish the rest of the DA. Thank you. I'm open for cross-sects.
Okay, so my question is, what exactly was the definition that you provided for the T?
For substantial?
Yes.
The definition we provided was, let me find it. All right, substantial is defined as to a great or significant extent.
Can you, in your own words, just summarize the main arguments of your inflation disadvantage?
All right. Yeah. So basically, uniqueness is that like our economy is growing after COVID, where, as you guys probably know, it's tanked, and government spending basically has in the past, especially with water policy, has increased inflation rates because water policy is like government spending leads to debt, which increases interest rates, which makes inflation go higher. And then this leads to global economic recession. And then you'll see the worst impacts of those in my partner's speech.
Okay. Do you have any questions? All right, that was all the questions we had. Thank you. Judge, can we have some prep time, please?
Sure. That's 2 minutes used.
Department of Safety, I need the staff member inside of Inspire Park Street to call 720-423-3911. You're tripping the bird alarm. Again, it's Department of Safety staff inside Inspire Park Street, call 720-423-3911.
So what do you
You're
mean
setting off the bird alarm.
That is 3 minutes used.
Okay, Judge, I'm ready.
Okay, that was 3:20.
Okay, so for a quick roadmap, I will be addressing the T violation, addressing the inflation disad, doing some case extensions, explanation of impact, and a framework. Time can start now. So to address our opponent's violation, so the negative team accuses us of violating the word substantially, to which we will be providing a new definition from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, which I'd also like to state that this dictionary is a notable dictionary that's been around for decades, defining words. Substantially is an adverb meaning consisting of or relating to substance, generally meaning importantly, essentially, fundamentally, or necessarily. So using this definition, our plan is substantial. using this definition, our plan is substantial because it solves for climate change, which is very fundamental and necessary for not only life on Earth, but marine biodiversity and the overall health of our ecosystems. So Judge, some standards I'd like you to use are fair limits. The water resource topic is fairly large. Prefer our definition because prefer our definition. Every word has meaning and reasonability. And finally, subpoint D voter. Vote for the affirmative definition because okay. Okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and move on into into addressing inflation DA. So our opponent states that our plan will cause inflation within the U.S. economy. First of all, I'd like to state that COVID isn't over. We are still in the midst of a global pandemic, and with whatever plan that could ever be proposed, inflation is always I wouldn't say at risk, but it's always something to be considered. Therefore, making inflation inevitable, given the massive amounts of stimulus withheld economic activity from the pandemic. Yandel 2021. America is observing a growing inflationary trend, not something temporary. Americans obviously need more information to make a firm judgment. Part of that information is interest rates, which tend to capture inflation expectations determined across the world markets. But first, one should look closely at some inflation gauges managed by the Fed district banks. All of these measures of current and expected inflation coupled with the data discussed earlier shows that America may see a 2.5% to 3% inflation in the next few years. I'll cut the card there. This is basically just showing not only where we are in terms of our economics and in terms of everything that's happened in the past year, it makes inflation inevitable given really any plan. I'd also like to read another card. The next argument is misleading. High government spending does not correlate with inflation. Downey 2021. We can have inflation with high government spending or without high government spending. The real danger is a performative belief that high government spending causes inflation. Dangerous inflation, could stimulate government spending, despite the fact that high government spending, especially on fundamentals such as physical and social infrastructure, do not lead to dangerously high inflation. So basically, what this card is saying that inflation isn't all due to government spending. It can be due to government spending, or it cannot be due to government spending, which is basically disregarding the points that my opponent is trying to make. And now I'll move on to my case extensions. Judge, I want to reiterate to you why it is so important that we do pass this affirmative plan. First of all, I'd like to restate our plan text. Which states that we will be decommissioning and removing future plans for all dams that pollute water resources. So dams that pollute water resources, if there's a certain dam that does not pollute water resources, it is unnecessary to remove that. And that is exactly what our plan is doing. The whole goal of our plan is not only to protect these water resources, but to increase food sovereignty for Native Americans, to address all the other harms that my partner addressed, and to also mitigate the effects of climate change, which I will read a card for. Policymakers and the public simply don't understand how bad climate change really is. Wallace 20. Most climate storytelling from scientists and advocates have focused on the optimistic end of the spectrum of possibility. The public simply doesn't understand the gravity of the threat we are facing. We hold three big delusions. The first is about the speed of change. Most people understand climate change to be a very slow process, but we are already beginning to see the effects of climate change in extreme weather. So this is happening currently. The second big delusion is about the scope of change. We have heard a lot about Arctic ice melts and sea level rise, but there are economic impacts, agricultural impacts, and public health issues just about everywhere. The third big delusion is about the severity of change. It will shake out throughout our politics, our culture, our relationship to capitalism, our sense and place in nature, and our history. Climate change is and will be the defining meta-narrative of the 21st century. If this climate change is something that does not only affect our ecosystem, but it affects our relationship to capitalism, it affects our politics, politics, it affects our economics. It is something we need to take action for now, and it's something we need to mitigate now so that the effects of it are less than what we are seeing and what we're yet to see, which is what the AF plan is doing. I'd also like to state that it is hard to measure something that is immeasurable, which is the amount of pollutants and chemicals that dams pose in our water resources. When all these dams are breaking into lakes and streams, like I stated, it causes these chemicals to go into our water resources. And so therefore, by removing and decommissioning these dams and future dams, not only are we protecting water resources, but we are also prioritizing the planet's ecosystems, mitigating the effects of climate change, and solving for marine biodiversity, which is overall impacting us at a large, like I stated, not just our ecosystem, but every single aspect of our life, which is why it is so important that we solve for this now, Judge. Thank you. I am now open to cross-examination.
All right. Could you repeat your definition of consisting to or relating to of a substance?
Sorry. Yeah, and it's from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and substantially is an adverb meaning consisting of or relating to substance, generally meaning importantly or essentially or fundamentally or necessarily.
Okay. Is there any cards to prove that the inflation is inevitable?
Yes, I read 2 of them.
Oh, okay. Could you rephrase them?
Where is it? So I'll just sum it up. But basically, given really any plan, and especially where we are within economics, being that we are in the midst of a global pandemic with several variants, really any government spending or anything else in our economy could lead to inflation, as stated in my second card. So it could be all of government spending or it could be none of government spending. It is not solely government spending that causes inflation. Therefore, the argument that you guys propose in your disadvantage is inaccurate.
Okay. I have a question, another one. What are you going to do to the polluted dams that are damming water from going into cities? Is there anything that's going to happen to those?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase?
Yeah, sorry. There's dams that are blocking like rivers and lakes from flowing into cities. I was wondering, and I'm assuming with the 52,000 that you stated that there are, that some of them are going to be polluted. So is there anything that you're going to do to those dams?
Yeah, so there pretty much are alternatives to removing those, and that can be the tidal or the wave energy one. And so the tidal one, it pretty much it captures energy from like masses of water moving and in and out due to tidal forces. And so another one is a wave energy. So the wave energy, it's produced by like this up and down motion of floating devices placed on the surface. So that can be another way to do that.
All right, we'll take prep time.
Okay. You have used 136 so far.
Okay, we'll take 2 minutes. Thank you.
4 minutes used.
All right, I'm good.
Okay, you've used a total of 410.
Okay. All right, so let me find my place. Okay, a quick roadmap of what I'll be talking about. I'll be finishing the inflation DAs and the impact of the recession. I'll be finishing our topicality, and I'll be responding to the affirmative claims. The app argues that the inflation is inevitable, but let me repeat the card read in 1 NC. Government spending on policies like this have been known to be vulnerable to inflation. Kaiser, 2019. Existing water quality CBAs are undertaken before the regulation takes effect. This is precisely when we know the least about a policy. CBAs can be incomplete and fail to account for some benefits or costs. Changes are very difficult to document systematically because the relevant data, when collected at all, are scattered. Range of available data on many aspects of surface water is still poor. Contention 3, our internal link. Point A. High government spending leads to inflation. Only way to avoid is through high taxation. Long 21. Higher government spending and higher deficits tend to drive inflation higher. Contention 4, Part A, impact. U.S. economic decline has caused detrimental damage to the U.S. less than 15 years ago. Chen, Markak, and Nabar, 18. A study looked at a sample of 180 countries to measure the decline in economic activity in the decade after Lehman Brothers collapse. Many economies saw output losses relative to pre-crisis trends. Some suffered severe banking crisis as a part of the global financial panic, while others saw weaker activity in advanced economics reverberated globally through trade and financial channels. The widespread pattern spanning advanced emerging markets and low-income developing economies suggests losses go beyond such correlation. Analysis shows that the crisis may have left lasting scars beyond these well-documented effects on growth trends. For example, fertility rates have been on a steeper decline in many economies, a development that will drag on the size of the labor force in the future in those countries. Another effect is that net migration rates among advanced economies decline after the crisis. Income inequality appears to have increased, especially where output and employment losses after the crisis were large. Constraints bonded to banks more tightly when financial conditions tightened after the crisis. The policy efforts of the past decade had significant side effects. The extended period of ultra-low interest rates and advanced economies has contributed to the buildup of financial vulnerabilities and the large accumulation of public debt and erosion of fiscal buffers in many economic points to the urgency of rebuilding those defenses to prepare for the next downturn. Recessions in the U.S. always lead to high unemployment rates. Cotter 20. Economic downturn swelled the ranks of unemployed Americans by more than 14 million, from 6.2 million in February to 20.5 million in May 2020. As a result, the U.S. unemployment rate shot from 3.8% in February, among the lowest on record in the post-World War II era, to 13% in May. That rate was the era's second highest, trailing only the level reached in April, which was 14.4%. The unemployment rate in May 2020 was as high as 16% by the U.S. government, a sharp decline in labor force participation among U.S. workers overall. In May, 9 million Americans not in the labor force were in one of a job, compared with 5 million in February. High unemployment rates are detrimental in a number of ways. Simpson 20. Unemployment is universally recognized as understandable or undesirable. When a person loses their job, there is often an immediate impact on the person's standard of living. The average saving rates in the U.S. had been drifting down towards zero, and there are anecdotal reports that the average person is only a few weeks away from serious financial trouble without a paying job. Even those eligible for unemployment benefits and other forms of government assistance, it is often the case that these benefits replace 50% or less of the regular income. That means that these people are consuming far less than the usual. However, the economic consequences can go beyond just less consumption. Many people will turn to retirement savings in a pitch, and draining these savings has long-term ramifications. Unemployment can lead to robbing the economy of otherwise useful talents. Unemployment can lead to greater skepticism and pessimism about the value of education and training, and led to workers being less willing to invest in the long years of training some jobs require. The absence of income created by unemployment can force families to deny educational opportunities to their children and deprive the economy of those future skills. Unemployment harms the mental health of workers and can worsen physical health and shorten lifespans. There are often increased for protectionism and severe restrictions on immigration. Protectionism can not only lead to destructive tit-for-tat retaliation among countries, but reductions in trade harm the economic well-being for all trade partners. Studies have shown that times of elevated unemployment offer correlation with higher crimes because absent a wage paying job, people may turn to crime to meet their economic needs. Unemployment leads to higher payments for state and federal governments for unemployment benefits, food assistance, and Medicaid. In July 2020, payments from the state and federal governments for unemployment benefits totaled $18.26 billion. State and federal governments are no longer collecting the same levels of income tax as before, forcing these governments to borrow money, which defers the cost and impact of unemployment to the future. Even those receiving government support cannot spend at prior levels. The production of those workers leaving the economy, which reduces the gross domestic product and moves the country away from the efficient allocation of its resources. Companies pay a price for high unemployment as well. Unemployment benefits are financed largely by taxes assisted on businesses. When unemployment is high, states will often look to replenish their coffers by increasing their taxation on businesses, counterintuitively discouraging companies from hiring more workers. Not only do the companies face less demand for their products, but it's also more expensive for them to retain or hire workers. The consequences of inflation and unemployment is likewise a serious issue. Apart from the social unrest and disgruntlement that unemployment can produce in the electorate, high unemployment can have a self-perpetuating negative impact on businesses and the economic health of the country. The cost of unemployment go far beyond the accumulated sums handed out as unemployment insurance benefits. The AF plan, which plans to remove dams, involves government spending because of how much it costs. Ultimately leads to the inflation, which causes a recession that comes along with unemployment. It will lead to a domino effect of unemployment in the United States that will all result in more impoverished American people, less talent in the workforce, higher rates of depression and suicide. It will deny immigrants from the U.S. It will increase crime in the U.S. and it will further increase government spending, as well as increase taxes on corporation, minimize profits, lessen venture stock markets crashing, and in turn, all of that will lead America to becoming a poorer country. The negative impact of the plan is far worse than the positive impact of an untopical plan. The definition of substantial provided by the AF differs from the definition of substantially. Our definition of substantially is from the respected dictionary of Oxford languages, which states to a great significant extent. This plan does not create any substantial changes. There is no specific number as to how much water pollution is actually due to the chemical toxins released from dams. It could be a very small number for all we know. By allowing the affirmative to follow the resolution so loosely, we are essentially allowing them to run an infinite number of cases, which makes it impossible for the negative to prepare. If the negative cannot prepare, they cannot provide class and ensure we lose all educational value from this debate. Topicality is the single most important voting issue because it maintains the standards which are essential to having a productive debate. Topicality enforces the rules of debate, and without it, debate simply won't be a debate. You need to vote on topicality because otherwise we are allowing the affirmative to win by essentially cheating, and the debate as a whole dies. Furthermore, the DUDL judge manual says on page 23, there are two teams in each debate round. One is affirmative or AF, and their job is to establish why the resolution is a good idea. And judge, in this instance, the affirmative has failed to establish why the resolution is a good idea. We must follow steadfast rules of debate. The affirmative cannot be allowed to win if they don't propose a policy and defend the resolution. This is a prior issue that is literally written into the rules of the policy debate and must be the main influence of the role of the ballot. We must be able to have a policy debate around a topic that we agreed to debate on. I would now like to talk about the evidence that was stated in the first cross-ex about how much methane that they were producing from the dams. And regarding okay, my partner will finish that.
Okay, Neg, would you like some more prep time? Neg.
We're open for cross-ex.
Oh, sorry, cross-ex, yes, sorry, go ahead.
Hold on.
Okay, so my question is, I know how one of your impacts of the inflation DA was that it's going to like create this chance of high unemployment rates. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Right. Do you want me to just read the card again?
No, just like words.
Well, so when inflation rates rise, interest rates rise, which causes recession in the economy. So then corporations are spending more money and have more costs and have more taxes, so they have to lay off employees, and then employees are file for employees that are unemployed file for unemployment, and it creates this vicious cycle.
Okay.
So are you stating that all government spending causes inflation?
No.
So then what are you stating?
In terms of what? Like I told you what unemployment does.
No, but like I'm just asking you in terms of your whole disadvantage that all government spending is automatically.
We're saying government spending on water cases like this one specifically is more prone and vulnerable to inflation, which causes this recession.
Why is it more vulnerable for spending money on water?
I can read my card again about that if you want.
No, we want you to explain in your own words at least.
Like
Well-
what makes it spending on water so much more?
Because
Well,
money's
okay,
money.
for example, well, okay, like taking down a dam is a long process and it costs a lot of money. And we have to take down all the dams in the US.
We didn't say, that's not what our plan text states. Our plan text states that we will decommission and cancel any future plans for dams that are polluting water and adding to methane and carbon emissions.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, so our plan is to decommission and to cancel any further plans for dams that are adding to the methane and carbon emissions or to the overall, or that are overall harming our water resources.
Yeah, but there's 52,000 large dams in the US and regulating
that's-
that would cost money.
Okay.
That was all.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, now Nick, would you like some more cross-sects?
Yeah. Wait, so can I have, what, 3 minutes?
You've used 410, so you've got
Uh,
plenty.
We have 6 left, right?
Yeah, just under.
Just take this.
Can I take 4 minutes? Is 4 good?
Oh. I'll let you know as you use it. Total of 6, so 4 minutes remaining. 3 minutes remaining. Minutes remaining. One minute remaining.
All right, I'm good.
Okay. So you have 50 seconds left.
Okay, sounds good. All right. In this rebuttal, I'll be talking about our topicality argument, and then I will be going on to further talk about our inflation DA and rephrase it. All right. So interpretation, the 2021-22 resolution is resolved the United States federal government should substantially increase its protection of water resources in the United States. Next, substantially is defined as from Oxford languages to a great or significant extent. Second is violation. According to the resolution, the affirmative must enact substantial change. The plan does not create any substantial change as there is not a specific number as to how much water pollution is actually due to chemical toxins from released dams. It could be a very small number for all we know. Third is standards and policy debate. The affirmative ground is the resolution and negative ground is everything else. So Judge, the negative wins on their topicality argument because it is important to maintain educational value and debate for both teams and to need to fulfill their roles. We have proved that the affirmative team has not done so and has not allowed us to provide full clash. They could loosely run all their cases because their plan is not topical to substantially. All right, next, I'd like to add that the U.S. economy is currently surging from the recovery of COVID-19. Besides the Russia-Ukraine conflict, our economy has been on an upward trend. Our GDP has been growing at an average pace of 7.5% in 2021, which has been unseen since 1951. There are legitimate concerns of inflation, though. Serious overheating would force the Federal Reserve to put out fire by raising interest rates so rapidly that the recovery itself would be threatened. The Federal Reserve has been engaged in a delicate balancing act between providing enough support to an economy battered by the coronavirus while avoiding other stimuli. Responses to the pandemic have caused tensions that threaten stability, like stimulus checks. That is an example of government spending that has threatened stability, which government spending is even worse. Existing trends have been given fresh momentum by the crisis. These business risks emanating from the trends have been amplified by the crisis and include stagnation, the collapse of small businesses, and the exacerbation of inequality, making it harder to achieve long-term sustainable development. Existing water CBAs are undertaken before the regulation takes effect. This is precisely what we know, at least about policy. CBAs can be incomplete and fail to account for some benefits, or costs. Changes are very difficult to document systematically because of relevant data when collected at all, and this causes high government spending with water and makes it more vulnerable to inflation. A range of available data on many aspects of surface water pollution is still poor. The rest is explained and backed by our evidence. Inflation with government spending on water, inflation rises, which causes the Federal Reserve to rise interest rates, and which causes unemployment, and it causes economic downfall. The affirmative plan of deassembling all these dams in the U.S. involves government spending because of the regulation it requires. And ultimately, it ultimately leads to inflation, which causes a recession that comes along with unemployment. This is a vicious domino effect. I can list the terrible effects and impacts of the affirmatives plan right now. There are more impoverished American people because of this vicious cycle. There will be less talent in the workforce, which is always a bad thing. There's already a supply chain interruption. We will have higher rates of depression and suicide that come along with unemployment. Immigrants will be denied from the U.S. because the U.S. does not let in immigrants during times of recession. There's increased crime in the U.S. because unemployment is higher and nobody has a job to support themselves. Government spending is going to increase with stimulus checks, which is going to make the whole situation worse on top of water and government spending. And then increased taxes on corporations will be a result to pay off this debt, which will minimize profits for corporations, which means there are less investors in their equities, and the stock market crashes even more. And eventually, because of the affirmatives plan, America will become one of the poorest countries in the world. This is a vicious cycle. And for this reason, please vote negative, Judge. Thank you.
Very good. Affirmative, would you like prep?
Yes, please.
All right, you've used 320 so far.
Great.
It's a total of 5 minutes used. Four minutes remaining.
Judge, the affirmative is ready.
Okay, that was, let's see, so you've used 640 now.
Judge,
Yes?
Mike, I think I'm frozen.
Oh, you're good. Are you not hearing me?
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I
Yeah.
thought I was frozen.
Yeah, so you've used 640.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, Judge, are you ready? Opponents, are you ready? Partner, are you ready? For a quick roadmap, I'm going to touch on the topicality argument, and then I'm going to touch on the DA, and then pretty much extend everything on my case. So with that, time can start now. Judge, prefer our definition, which is by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, which is a really credible author, and it states to substantially is an adverb meaning consisting of or relating to substance, generally meaning importantly, essentially, fundamentally, or necessarily. And prefer our definition because this is the affirmative case, and we know what exact type of, what's the word I'm looking for? We know exactly what we want the affirmative case to do. So that's why the way that we use substantially was used in the way of necessarily or fundamentally. But prefer qualitative data over quantitative, and we've stated that the threat that chemicals in water poses on food sovereignty and indigenous people, and how methane, CO2 emissions continue to rise. Like my partner stated, we see effects of climate change now, and we don't need data or numbers to prove to us that it's an evident issue. And also, it's hard to measure something immeasurable when dams connect to so many different things, including deltas, including rivers, including streams. So it's hard to measure something that's pretty much immeasurable. And now moving on to the inflation DA. Don't vote on P. Now moving on to the inflation DA. This is the government talking about itself. Government spending with regard to inflation. Duper 2016. Government spending has little to no effect on inflation. Across the board, we found almost no effect of government spending on inflation. For example, in our benchmark specification, we found that a 10% increase in government spending led to an 8 basis point decline in inflation. Pretty much meaning that what the negative wants you to think is that with the government spending money, there's going to be a rise in inflation, but that's completely false. Now moving on, Zerini 2022. From an economic perspective, there are 4 big components: consumer spending, business spending, government spending, and the net spending from trade. Inflation basically derives from a malfunctioning in the market, which drives up prices. The parts of the American market that could malfunction in this manner are consumer and business spending. These are the parts of the economy that are driven in part by prices. Government spending, however, is somewhat outside of these other 2 categories. If anything, government monetary policy can be used to correct such malfunctions. For example, during the Ford administration, the WHIP Inflation Now program imposed price controls. The malfunctions we are experiencing currently are due more to the pandemic, such as the shutdown of factories and logistics bottlenecks. Normal everyday government spending is not the cause of inflation. So the whole argument that the negative is trying to make that if we pass the affirmative plan, that it's going to create this inflation and lead to all of these different effects is completely false. And to extend on that, I also want to talk about the negative tactics. And so the negative tactics, they haven't attacked our harms at all. So they agree that there is an inherent problem. They haven't attacked our inherency. So they do believe that the status quo is not fixing it. They haven't attacked our solvency, and they haven't attacked our plan all in all. So if anything, everything still stands. There's an inherent problem, and our plan and solvency solves for everything. And I'm going to extend everything on the case. So if anything, we're solving for multiple things. We're not just solving for climate change. We're also solving for food sovereignty for Native Americans. We're also solving for ecosystems, and we're also solving for climate change. So if anything, there's so many more benefits that outweigh something that outweigh what the negative is trying to say that isn't going to even happen. But if anything, Judge, like I want you to really vote on the framework. Consider voting on the framework instead of the T. We want you to vote for the framework that is moral. Prioritize a policy that best maintains the planet's ecosystems, because there is a cycle of the ecosystem being connected to how humans function. And so please extend my framework. The services are interwoven with everything we do, and many of our activities are severing the threads that support these ecosystem services at random and at an accelerating rate. And these connections need to be made more visible in assessments of nature's contributions to human well-being in order to fully understand how to manage and protect these benefits of humans. So,
Thank you.
vote A. Thank you.
All right. Ned, you've got 50 seconds left. Ten seconds left. And that is time.
Brenner, are you ready? A quick roadmap. In this speech, I'll be refuting my opponent's arguments as well as addressing the negatives, winnings, contentions. My opponent has already described the atrocious effects of the affirmative plan, and I'll be further elaborating on the topicality of the AFS plan. All right. The first point, the affirmative definition cannot be prepared because they are defining a completely different word. The affirmative is defining substantial and an adjective, while the resolution includes substantially an adverb. Thus, the affirmative has failed to make their plan topical because their plan does not solve anything of any quantitative number. In the resolution, quantitative trumps qualitative, as substantially or a great extent implies a quantitative impact. Topicality is the single most important voting issue because it maintains the standards which are essential to having a productive debate. Topicality enforces the rules of debate, and without it, debate simply wouldn't be a debate. You need to vote on topicality because otherwise we are allowing the affirmative to win by essentially cheating, and the debate as a whole dies. Furthermore, the DUDL judge manual says on page 23 there are two teams in each debate round. One is affirmative or AF, and their job is to establish why the resolution is a good idea. And judge, in this instance, the affirmative has failed to establish why the resolution is a good idea. We must follow steadfast rules of debate. The affirmative cannot be allowed to win if they don't propose a policy and defend the resolution. This is a prior issue that is literally written in the rules of policy debate and must be the main influence of the role of the ballot. We must be able to have a policy debate around a topic that we agree to debate upon. The AF loses on topicality, therefore vote negative, judge. Second point, we have attacked the affirmative's harms when we responded. The AF has not provided a number of chemical toxins released from dams. It could be a very small number for all we know. We claim that the AF has not provided a solid number of dams contributed to the water pollution. The third point, how is measuring pollution in dams immeasurable? There is a reason there is no quantitative information or cards on measuring pollutants, because it's not even bad enough to actually get numbers on. Judge, you should vote negative because the affirmative's arguments is not topical. It will create large amounts of inflation, which will turn and create a vicious cycle, and the Americans will be all at a severe risk. Thank you.
All right. Affirmative, you've used 640, so you've got 320 left.
The affirmative would like to use all their prep time
Okay.
left. Thank you, Judge.
You've used 8 minutes. One minute remaining.
Judge, the affirmative is ready.
Okay.
Okay, so for a quick roadmap, I will be addressing the T violation, addressing a drop, and then providing you with a few frameworks and viewing and summarizing our whole case. Time can start now. Judge, you should, where's the topic? Can you give me the topic, please? So we've already read our definition multiple times, where we state substantially is an adverb meaning consisting or relating to a substance, generally meaning importantly, essentially, fundamentally, or necessarily. Judge, the negatives whole argument against our concerning topicality is that we don't have any quantitative data for them. And due to us not having any real numbers, it must not be a real problem. Judge, you don't need numbers. You can look around and see the effects of climate change all around you. You don't need numbers. You can look around and see the effects food sovereignty, inadequate food sovereignty has on Native Americans. You don't need numbers when this is an issue you can see all around you. The claims and the points that the negative have made over this whole debate, not only are they extremely petty and nitpicky, but they continue to disregard all the points that my partner and I have brought up. So therefore, Judge, you should not vote on topicality because we are in fact topical. Our plan does solve. Moving on to the drop, our opponent did not address their own DA in their last speech, basically dropping their own DA, which I'd like to furthermore extend. In our last round of cross-ex, our opponent states that not all government spending causes inflation, specifically government spending on water resources, which is confusing to me because money is money. And I don't understand how spending money specifically on water resources that's going to improve the ecosystem and the environment is somehow causing inflation. I'd also like you to reject the negatives alarmism, as my partner and I have stated multiple times now, that inflation is inevitable and inflation is caused with or without government spending. The negative is this whole round, the negative has been concerned about inflation and definitions, when my partner and I are actually concerned about human lives, about the protection of food sovereignty for Native Americans. We are coming from a moral standpoint, trying to do what's right. And we believe that, Judge, it is your moral obligation to vote affirmative if you want to vote for the plan that best prioritizes the planet ecosystem. I'd also like to talk about how the negative hasn't proven that our harms to be inherent, because it is inherent. The negative has not successfully attacked our solvency because our plan does indeed solve. I would like to extend on the solvency card that my partner read earlier. A case in the point of the Eula River in Washington, where 2 hydroelectric dams built in the last century exacted huge environmental costs, were no longer important as power generators. Salmon runs that once reached about 40K fish in a year dropped to lower than 3K. A year after the Elwood Dam was removed, salmon returned into the river in numbers not seen in decades, with 3/4 of them observed spawning upstream from in the former dam site. I'll cut the card there. This shows data that through removing the dam in the Eula River did solve for the harm that my partner and I stated, which furthermore proves that our plan does solve. So, Judge, I'd like to propose a few frameworks for you. Judge, you should vote affirmative because we've met the affirmative burden of proving an inherent harm and why our plan does solve. You should vote affirmative because it is your moral obligation. Like I've stated, the negative is concerned about inevitable inflation and definitions. When we are concerned about the morality of our planet and our ecosystem and the health and life of people, you should vote for F because you care about the severity of change, like I've mentioned in my climate change card, and because you care about the environment, and because the neg keeps repeating themselves while we are actually giving you reasons why our harms are greater than theirs, why our impacts are greater than theirs, and why you should care about the overall climate. Thank you, Judge.
All right, thank you. All right, nice round, everybody. Did everybody have fun? That was a good round. I was glad to be a part of it. I haven't judged a lot of debate here with all this COVID stuff, and it's always great to have a really good round. So thanks for that. I enjoyed it. Let's see. So let's talk about some things. Let's see. I think the biggest thing that everybody needs to spend a little more time thinking about is weighing your arguments for the judge. I tell people all the time that when you have a judge sitting in front of you, you should always treat them as always assume that they are stupid and lazy. Okay, and that especially goes for me. All right, I'm stupid and lazy. Now, don't treat me that way, out in the hallway or whenever you come across. But in the debate room, I want you to treat me and all other judges like we're stupid and lazy. So what does that mean? First of all, we are too stupid to figure out why your argument beats the other team's argument. Okay, we're too stupid to figure that out. You need to tell us why your argument beats the other team's arguments. Secondly, I am too lazy to figure out where your argument applies to the other team's arguments, so you need to tell me, right? So we did a really nice job in both the 1AC and the 1NC of having nice laid out, well-structured, signposted cases and DAs, right? I've got a contention 2A, contention, 2A, 2C, contention 3C, all of that stuff. Same for the DA, right? So then you can refer back to that, right? So we had a lot of argument on the DA, and it was a pretty long DA, probably 15 cards or something. And it would be good to say, okay, in regards to DA B, or DA contention 3, or be specific about that so that I know specifically where you're trying to apply the argument. That goes for both sides. AF, when you're attacking a particular point, tie it back to that. Neg, when you're talking about a particular point, tie it back to that. Right? Because otherwise, I'm trying to figure out where your new argument that you're making now applies to the other one and where you want it to clash. So go ahead and be specific about that. I'm too lazy to figure that out. I'm too stupid to figure that out. So always consider your judges to be stupid and lazy when you're making arguments for them, and lay it out for them in really clear terms. That will win you debate rounds, okay? Because even if I'm smart enough to figure it out, I might figure it out differently than how you intended me to, right? So it's, that you have to lay it out for me and all judges, right? And be really specific about where your argument applies and why it wins the round. So let's talk about that a little bit with some specifics here. I have a couple of definitions of substantial or substantially, right? One's from Webster's, one's from Oxford. You're both talking about them being, very good sources. They are both top-notch sources. Nobody's ever going to impugn either one of them, right? So talk to me about why your definition is better than the other definition. Got a little bit of that in 2NR. You were talking about how that your definition was better there, and a little bit of that in 2AR when you were talking about that we should just be able to look around and see that there's a substantial impact, right? So that stuff needed to come earlier and talk and to tell me about, why your definition is better. And in general, it's always better to just show that you meet the negative definition than it is to read your own, right? Because now we've got this whose definition is better, and you got a 50-50 chance at that argument, right? But you would meet their definition, right? So their definition was, essentially, not I didn't catch all the words of it, but it's not substantial, and you've got lots of substantial impacts, right? So you could talk about all the substantial impacts. The fact that you can't provide a couple numbers doesn't mean that you're not substantial, right? So, and none of this have to do with my actual decision. I'm making the actual decision based on what was argued in the round. So don't be reading stuff into this yet, right? But as a general rule, you're going to want to try to show how you meet the terms of the other people's definition rather than giving a counter definition. And I think you could have done that here, but you didn't. I thought the DA was laid out really nicely. I think the key piece to attack on the DA was the link, and so affirmative, you did exactly that, and you tried to take on the link, and we had some good discussion about the link. On topicality, hey, I love the fact that you quoted the DUDL manual for your theory on topicality, in part because I helped write that manual. So that was well done. No, it does help to kind of quote outside sources. You can do the DUDL manual, or there's a bunch of resources out on the web that'll talk about why topicality is really important or why topicality is not important. Should topicality mean, or should topicality basically come down to the affirmative needs to prove that the resolution is true, or that particular aspect of it needs to meet the topic. There are various ways that you can interpret topicality, and referring to outside resources, outside experts like that is often a good way to help. So let's see, what else? Otherwise, I thought this was a good debate. For prep time, 1NR should not really need any prep time, and you used over 4 minutes. You can write your speech during 2NC, right? And so really the only thing you need to do is just do a brief consult with your partner when they sit down from 2NC to say, hey, is there anything else that I need to cover? Anything that you think is important for me to bring out? That's a 10-second conversation, and then you're up and talking, right? Because you can write that entire speech during 2NC. You don't have to use any prep time prior to 1NR at all. So yeah, and you used a lot of it, so we only had 50 seconds left to put together a 2NR, which is having to sum up the whole debate into a 5-minute speech. 50 seconds is a little bit challenging. So I would try to leave 2NR a little more time. And on affirmative, you had lots of prep time. I felt like you managed it pretty well, so I felt good about that. I guess that's what I would have to say to you. Anything else that you'd like to mention? Oh, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about. So on the DA, let's just talk just kind of out loud about what is it that would be a potential problem with tearing down dams.
Sorry, wait, what were you saying? We switched that.
Now, what would be some general problems with tearing down dams?
Well, we just think like it would cost government money.
I understand the argument that you made, but what would be some other arguments that could have been made about that?
Well, you're getting rid of drinking water.
There you go.
And industrial use.
Yeah.
Use for agriculture, irrigation.
Yeah. Keep going.
It controls flood and like
there
rain.
You go. All right. So there are the problems with tearing down dams. Okay, those are the disadvantages that I wanted to hear, right, in 1NC. Tearing down dams means you're subject to drought. Cities are going to, die because of drought. But the whole agriculture stuff is going to die because there's not enough water, right? These are the kinds of things that should be a DA to tearing down a dam. We don't need to necessarily talk about government spending being the DA, particularly when you can't quantify how much they're going to spend and get to the link or the brink, I guess you would say, on the DA of, you got to spend X many billions of dollars, and then we get inflation and you don't know how many billions of dollars they're going to spend and you don't know where that brink is, right? So that makes for a weaker DA where you can really strongly say, look, Dams are here to provide us water to drink. They're here so that farmers can have the water that they need to grow their crops. Without those things, people die. Right? That would be the DA that I would want to hear on a dam. You may not have it in, a brief for that already written, but you can just come up with one on the fly pretty easily, right? That look, the reason that these things are here, they were built for a reason, right? And the reason was to make people's lives better and to ensure that they have drinking water and to ensure that we can, grow our crops. You're taking all that away. So that's where I would have gone with the DA. All right. Any questions for me? All right. Great round. I enjoyed it. Best of luck to you. And, maybe we'll see you around again.
All right, thank you, Judge. Good job. You guys are great opponents.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you. You guys as
too.
well.